We begin the program in Zimbabwe, where intending candidates for August elections have been told by the Electoral Commission to pay for the registration fees in cash. This comes after the Zimbabwean lawmakers upheld a controversial decision to increase the fees for registration. Candidates for the presidency are now to pay $20,000 while the parliamentary candidates are to pay $1,000. The Wednesday deadline for registration was extended by 1 day because of problems with the payment system, meaning some candidates' fees could not be processed. The 20-fold hike in registration fees has reduced the number of candidates. The Commission reveals that 11 candidates have been disqualified from the election slated to hold in August. Now, joining us for this discussion, we have Mandinde Indolovo, journalist and media trainer. He joins us from the Zimbabwean capital, Harare, and we expect all the panelists to join during the course of the conversation. Now, Mandinde, a warm welcome to you and thanks for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you so much to the viewers and thank you for having me.
Mandinde, what's your analysis of the rationale behind the decision to significantly increase the fees for presidential and parliamentary candidates in Zimbabwe? This is a 20-fold increase. And what potential implications do you think this move will have on the overall electoral process?
Thank you so much once again. As you would know, that the last time when we had our elections, the presidential election fee was $1,000, and it has increased to $20,000 or an equivalent in the local Zimbabwean currency for those that are vying for the post of president. And also, it was raised from $50 to $1,000 for those that vying for the post of members of parliament, that is the National Assembly and the Senate. So what this means is that it has an effect on the poor, the right of the poor to actually participate in electoral process. So if you look at the Zimbabwean National Constitution, if you go to section 67 of the National Constitution, it actually provides for a right for every Zimbabwean to actually participate in electoral processes, regardless of their gender, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their social standing, to actually participate in any electoral process that they may wish to. So the challenge that has been brought about by this by these new fees is that it has had an impact on the smaller political parties, those that have no funding from the Political Parties Finance Act, which actually provides money or in terms of capital for those political parties that has a representation in parliament. So what this means is that it has had an impact on smaller political parties. We've had a political party led by a woman, I think one of the few women presidential candidates, Linda Masarira, who leads what is known as the Labour, Economic and African Democrats Party, failing to actually pay those fees. So what it really means is that it has put a cost on our democracy. And also, if you look at other political parties, we've had them pulling. We have a party known as Zypo, with their presidential candidate pulling out, and them actually filing only 29 available parliamentary seats throughout the country. So what this means is that elections have been actually put at a cost. Democracy has actually been put at a cost where those that have no money cannot participate, or they cannot exercise their right to choose the leaders of their choice.
Now, Mandinde, you did mention that this has put a cost on Zimbabwe's democracy, but I want us to get into the specifics. In your opinion, to what extent, I know you mentioned some examples, do you believe the increased fees might act as a deterrent for potential candidates from opposition parties or those with limited financial means? What have we seen so far? What effects have we seen?
The effect that we have seen is that we have seen other political parties actually failing to participate in the elections. I've given the example of the lead political party. I've also given the example of Zypo political party. We also have the Democratic Union of Zimbabwe political party does, also failing to actually participate in the election. So this means that this has had a huge impact on those that want to participate in the elections. But that as it may, maybe we need a context to the Zimbabwean political system, where we have two main players really, which is ZANU-PF and the Citizens Coalition for Change. But this has had an impact, because if you look at the other players that have actually filed, of the 11 candidates that have actually made it to the presidential, that will actually contest for the presidential rate, only 2 of them have been able to file in all the 210 constituencies. So this means that in terms of the cost, it has actually affected other political players that would have wished to actually participate in these elections. While some critics will argue that the other political parties will not matter, because Zimbabwe is really a two-party political system, where we have the main ruling parties, ZANU-PF, and the opposing Triple C political party. But there are some political parties that are budding. As you would know, Zimbabwe is a multi-democratic party. It's a multi-democracy system. So what it means is that it has had an impact on those that are still starting their political parties, or what I would call the small players.
Okay. Thank you, Londolozi. I'd like to bring in Advocate Wilbert Mandinde, the program's coordinator for Zimbabwe Human Rights NGO Forum. He also joins live from the capital, Harare. A warm welcome to you, Wilbert, and thanks for joining us in the conversation.
Thank you. Good evening.
Now, we've been discussing this 20-fold increase as passed by Parliament for nomination fees for those that are seeking the highest office, and $1,000 for parliamentarians. The ruling ZANU-PF party has argued that the higher fees will result in a pool of more qualified and committed candidates. I mean, for you to put down $20,000 in cash shows some degree of seriousness. Do you agree with this assertion, or do you think it could inadvertently limit political participation by favouring individuals with greater financial resources? Like the first guest, Londolozi, said, it says it puts a cost on Zimbabwe's democracy.
All right, so if you are ruled by kleptocrats, then you will find yourselves in a situation that Zimbabweans find themselves in at the moment. We are ruled by people who, because this is a party which has been in power for a long time, ideally for the last 43 years, it has amassed the resources. There have been arguments from other quarters that the resources have been amassed through other means other than legal. And the fact that indeed they have the resources, they think everyone should have the resources. An election is not meant for the rich. An election is for everyone. And we've always admitted that when the Second Gbenga War was waged, it was so that everyone would be able, it was to participate in the elections. It was an issue of one man, one vote, or one person, one vote. But the issue is, it's not just about going to vote. It's also about being in a position to contest for the available seats. But when you then set up fees which people cannot afford, then certainly you are making it impossible for people to participate in an election. I think this was done by a party which simply has the resources and did not care about everyone else. Whilst we speak about 20,000 for the president, it is important that we emphasize that our constitution has 210 constituencies, and with each member of parliament required to pay $1,000. It meant a political party would have needed $210,000 plus 20,000 for the president to make it 230,000 United States dollars, and that's not small change even for some of the political players here. So I believe the idea was to limit and to make it more difficult for the smaller parties to participate in the elections.
Now, I'd like to stay with you, Wilbert. How might the substantial increase in nomination fees affect the ability of smaller parties or independent candidates to effectively compete in the upcoming elections? Are there any potential alternatives or measures which they can take to seek redress that could ensure a more fair and level playing field for all candidates, or is it too late?
It is certainly too late now, taking into account the fact that nomination court had been scheduled for the 21st of June, which was 2 days ago. There are a number of people who have gone to court, to the High Court and to our Constitutional Court, to challenge the fees. The Constitutional Court had referred the matter back to the Parliament, where it was expected to be considered by the Parliamentary Legal Committee with a view to see if it does not infringe or violate the Constitution. But the Parliamentary Legal Committee is a three-man or three-person committee, of which two are the ruling parties and PF. So they say there was nothing wrong with it, but there is everything wrong with it. The High Court has also not helped in this particular case, as it has referred the matter to what we call the ordinary law, and has dismissed the case as not urgent, despite the fact that the nomination day has since passed. So it's difficult. I'm aware of one or two more cases which were filed recently to challenge that, but the hope is that maybe those can be hit, though at the moment it would appear as if the horse has already bolted.
Thank you very much, Wilbert. I'd like to bring in our third esteemed guest on the program. We have Nozipho Moyo, Executive Director at Africa Kiburi. She joins us live from Washington, D.C. A warm welcome to you, Nozipho. We've been talking about this fees increase for candidates. The opposition party, the Triple C, has raised concerns about the discriminatory nature of the fees, even though they can clearly afford the $20,000. And elections in Zimbabwe have traditionally been a two-horse race. So based on their economic status and the other parties, the CCC has said, look, it is not right. So what constitutional or legal arguments could be made to challenge the imposition of such high fees, and what potential outcomes might arise from such challenges?
Sorry, come again?
I said the Triple C, the opposition party, even though they can afford this fee, has come out to say that they've raised concerns about the discriminatory nature of the fees, arguing that they disproportionately affect citizens based on their economic status. Are there any constitutional or legal arguments that could be made to challenge the imposition of such high fees?
Okay, for me, I feel this might have been a rush process. Lawmakers rubber stamped the process. And for me, the issue is when you're putting such fees, even if you're putting the legalities and the technicalities, the question should arise on why are we doing this and what does it hope to achieve? So I would like to speak not taking into cognizance what CC is saying, but the general mindset of all Zimbabweans, including smaller parties and independent candidates. It's, for me,
Hello, Nozipho, are you there? Okay. Hello, Nozipho, are you there?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm saying, for me, when at times we use legality, we should not cease that slavery was once legal, and it is known for government to use law as an oppression tool. And for me, as a woman, I'm looking at the 11 candidates who eventually registered to run for presidency. And with the economic woes you have mentioned earlier and what other colleagues have alluded to, that is why we're having issues of Linda Masarire, who's the only female who's running for presidency, failing to file those papers. So what democracy if it's not serving the needs of the minority? So for me, that is the red flag before the election really starts. Is this the democracy that is going to meet the needs of the grassroots communities if the grassroots community voices and muscles are not amplified through this process? Thank you.
Now, staying with you, Nozipho, I just want to know how this bill passed through Parliament. You did say it was a rubber stamp, but I'm very confident that it's not only ZANU-PF members that are in the Parliament. So do they have a majority, an absolute majority? And why wasn't this opposed in Parliament by other political parties?
I think we need to understand how the House of Assembly actually works and the technicalities that will allow such a bill, including bills like the Patriotic Bill, the PVO Bill, to pass. When it comes to majority, CC has been an opposition party that has won stronghold in urban councils. But when it comes to majority, the ruling party, ZANU-PF, has had that. And there's what we call the whipping system. Citizens, where CC identifying members who were elected under the MDC alliance in the last 2018 election took in money which was $40,000, which people believe was bribe money, so that the government could move through with such processes. Because people would notice that I've lost political mileage. There are a lot of factions happening within the opposition parties. I might not be running for 2023, and even if I'm running, there are no guarantees I'll still stand as a member of parliament. And people betrayed citizens. And those members of parliament actually went from opposition and took that money, and it made what the government led by ZANU-PF, what it was planning to actually come through. So the House of Parliament, the House of Assembly is actually compromised. It's a fallacy when we talk of democracy, when the needs of the minorities are not met, because we even have opposition members and ruling party members or members of parliament who are actually pushing their selfish needs.
Thank you, Nozipho. Okay, I believe the other guest, we've lost connection with them. So I'll stay with you, Nozipho. Now, taking into account Zimbabwe's ongoing economic crisis, how do you anticipate this factor influencing voter behavior and preferences in the upcoming elections? And what do you think is the number one issue on the minds of Zimbabwean electorates as they go to the polls in August? What issue is the number one priority that they want to see the government tackle?
Okay, is that for me? Sorry, I'm having audio
issues. Yes, Nozipho, yes.
Okay, the number one issue when it comes to the electorate will be the issues of economy. We have an issue of inflation in the world when it comes to issues of inflation. The Zimbabwe currency, bond or RTGS, whatever you want to call it, has been losing its value, and it's now over 86% in terms of inflation. People just want decency, a decent economy. People are looking at service provision. Women are looking at basic issues like health. When we're talking about issues of maternity, issues of health, we're looking at issues of education. We have power cuts where power is actually visiting our houses. Or we have roads in the portals because we no longer know roads in Zimbabwe. Those are basic things that we're looking at. And we look at who would be able to deliver that. And as electorates, as a woman electorate, it's very disheartening, because when people say we're in this mess because the ruling party, led by the ruling party, which is in government for 43 years, has brought us to this mess. Let's look into the opposition. Opposition let down female electorates because they did not push women to come in. And the needs of women in Zimbabwe would continuously be discarded even by other parties. So it's a very blurry election. You ask yourself, is it even worth voting for, considering what happened when the military was involved in the past election? But it really comes down to bread and butter issues.
Thank you, Nozipho. I'd like to bring back Wilbert into the conversation. Now, Wilbert, reflecting on President Emmerson Mnangagwa's tenure since assuming office in 2018, what would you say are his key achievements or shortcomings that are likely to influence his chances of securing a second term? How does the generality of Zimbabwe, how has his leadership been perceived by the general public?
That's a very difficult question. because the achievements are minimum if they are there. As someone who comes from civil society, I must acknowledge the fact that the government has passed the Zimbabwe Independent Complaints Commission Act, which is meant to ensure that complaints against the security officers, police, our intelligence, soldiers are investigated by an independent body.
But on the other hand, Wilbert, the same government passed the Patriotic Act. Your Minister of Information was in South Africa yesterday in a TV interview, and she was defending it. So, what do you really score as a positive point?
Let me take you back a little. So I was saying, despite the fact that that was passed, the Zimbabwe Independent Complaints Commission Act, it has not been operationalized. What we have seen instead is that there is more and more restrictive measures being put in place, shrinking civic space being put in place. We have the Private Voluntary Organizations Amendment Bill, which is meant to curtail the operations of non-governmental organizations. And eventually, because there is an application process envisaged in terms of that bill, we foresee that some NGOs will have their licenses revoked or will not be allowed to continue operating. You mentioned also the patriotic law, which is in terms of the criminal law codification and reform amendment bill, which was passed by Parliament and is pending the president's signature as well. This is one of the most drastic laws that this country has ever seen, more drastic than the Public Order and Security Act, which was repealed but replaced by the Maintenance of Law and Order, MOPA, as well as the Access to Information and Protection of Privacy Act. It's more repressive than those. This is a bill which will make mere lobby more difficult, discussion with foreign governments more difficult, meeting with our colleagues who work in embassies even difficult, because once you are there, the bill actually discusses and describes the meeting as a joint between two or more people. So when you meet with a colleague and you are discussing other issues, you can't even discuss issues such as sanctions, because the minute you say that and say the wrong things, you have violated particular legislation.
Yes. Now, just before we wrap up, I'd like to bring in Nozipho back into the conversation. Let's talk about opposition leader of the Triple C Party, Nelson Chamisa. He has emerged as a significant contender in the upcoming elections. Can you identify his strengths and weaknesses, and what are his chances against incumbent President Emmerson Mnangagwa?
That will be a tight race when we're looking at how the ruling party has brought us into a much messier position. Because if you compare how the coup, which was not the coup when Mugabe left, and the endorsement of President Emmerson Mnangagwa into president after the military shootout when people protested, and for the record to date, ZEC itself, Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, has never delivered the specifics on exactly how the president won, will show you that we are not guaranteed of a free or credible election. So, and when it comes to Mr. Nelson Chamisa, the fact that people are tired and want a change, Zimbabweans might repeat the same mistake that happened when Mugabe was removed. People are so thirsty that they're going to end up drinking from a poisonous cup. And Triple C has not brought tangible policy reforms on what he's really promising. The manifesto is blurry, as I'm saying, as an electorate and as a woman, when I'm having, I come from the second metropolitan in Zimbabwe, which is Bulawayo. We know with a constituency of 12, you have two people who he has endorsed to say they're coming in. And you look at other provinces like Marsh West, where there are not even women candidates who are being fielded to actually run for this. It will show you the level of patriarchy, of capitalism, which is linked to the government if opposition even has to run. My hope as an electorate is maybe a repetition of 2008, where we had a GNU, because it helped to provide monitoring checks and balance for both parties who have much following.
When you say
and
GNU,
really
you mean a government
stabilize the economy.
When you say GNU, you mean a government of national unity where opposition and a sort of power sharing deal?
Yes, yes. So the system in Zimbabwe is unfortunate because it's one winner takes all. And if the winner takes all, they end up making it messier. So for me, it's unfortunate that we have not had the electoral reforms because we'll not even be discussing why women are not there. And people would say, oh, the president has left 30% of local council, women will be endorsed. But there's a difference between ceremonial leadership and people who are coming in with the power to influence and to change. So I'm hoping this election, if it does not get bloodier, like what happened in 2018, the best for me would be a GNU because the best performing members of parliament in my history as a young adult have been through the GNU. I can give you the likes of David Portert, who was the Minister of Education, and the textbooks you find in public schools are still from 2008 and 2013, secured under his leadership.
Okay.
At that time, Nelson Chamisa was the Minister of ICT. Mugabe himself acknowledged that that boy worked very hard. And yes, he has something to contribute. You talk of Tendai Biti, who is blaring where he's standing now. He was one of the best performing ministers of finance. As well. So honestly, I wish for
unfortunately
candidates. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say a big thank you to our esteemed guest, Advocate Wilbert Mandinde, Programs Coordinator, Zimbabwe Human Rights NGO Forum, joining live from Harare in Zimbabwe, and also Nozipho Moyo, Executive Director at Africa Kiburi in Washington, D.C., and also Londolozi Ndlovu, journalist and media trainer, joining live from Harare, Zimbabwe. We do appreciate your contribution and insights to the program. You're watching The Conversation on News Central Television. When we return, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo says it doesn't believe Parliament has what it takes to address corruption and state capture. We'll get into details of this and more when we return. To stay with us.